On today's video, we go Uber driving on the most exclusive private islands along the coast of Sarasota. Alright, so Amanda tells us that she lives in the hood and she would like to see us do some Uber driving in some very rich or ritzy areas, and that's what we're doing today. What has my experience been? Uber driving in the most exclusive addresses. Many people think that usually when you are Uber driving in these very rich areas that the people give you extraordinarily generous tips. Boy, that couldn't be further from the truth. Today we are in a gated community on Longboat Key. Not only are we on an island, but we're also inside of a gated community on an island. Now, the person that took this trip, I cannot tell you anything about them because we have the Uber privacy policy, which means that they are entitled to their privacy. But I can tell you that they tipped me nearly $5, coming to about a 25% tip, which is considerably generous, particularly for this type of neighborhood. Now, that type of tip is on par with a generous tip in a poor neighborhood, or as Amanda calls it, living in the hood. So what type of person takes an Uber from a rich area, right? If you're rich, you probably have access to many vehicles. A lot of times when people take an Uber from a rich area like this, it is because they are going to be drinking or they were drinking and they don't want to violate the law. Another group of people are people that are not old enough to drive yet. Now, houses in this neighborhood go from 1.5 million up to 5 million. And that might sound like a lot of money to you, but to the people that live in this community, this is just simply the neighborhood where they live. I grew up in Naples, Florida, and in Naples, Florida, a neighborhood like this along the beach, houses are going to go between $13 to $170 million. So these $1 million homes are actually only worth a fraction of what a home in, let's say, Naples or West Palm Beach along the coast would cost you. In this area of Sarasota, along the beach, you have property owners to the liking of politicians, governors, perhaps lawyers that are very famous, musicians, movie stars, and of course, people who are just very wealthy in general. So far, I have been able to work directly with people that if you were to look up their address, they would be somebody, perhaps a politician or perhaps a famous person that you probably see their products or billboards every single day. In the case of this community, it is a gated community inside of a gated community on an island that only has one way in and one way out. So literally, if you were to commit a crime on this island, the chances of you escaping are almost absolutely zero. And in fact, Longboat Key has been considered one of the absolute safest places to live in the United States. Thus, people like governors and famous politicians are going to have homes here for safety. This particular trip was less than 10 miles long, and in total, it came out to about $16 with tip, taking me about 24 minutes. Keep in mind that when you're entering these gated communities, it takes a little bit longer because you have to get registered with the front gate, which we're about to pass on the way out. At first glance, it may seem really cool to give the ride of a famous politician or perhaps their precious wife or kids. But in reality, if you think about it, as a driver, the liability that you are having by having to carry this person isn't worth $17. I mean, if you start to think about some of the last names that live in these types of communities and the power they have, do you really want to be the person responsible for driving their wife or kids back and forth from somewhere for $17? Probably not worth the hassle. And honestly, one of the biggest thoughts that I always have when I go to these types of communities is the type of liability you're taking on. Not that one person is worth more than the next, but definitely not the type of person you want to upset and or have a problem with or get into a car accident or anything. Who knows what the crap could happen, right? And here you have this high-value person sitting in the back seat. It's definitely more a liability to me, actually. And if they tipped ridiculously amazing, I can understand it, but I honestly will tell you for $17 to carry a person of that high profile really isn't worth the hassle. There is a Publix and a fine little pharmacy here on Longboat Key, and we stopped at this shopping center, one of the few public business centers on the island, to actually get something to drink or use the restroom. It's a nice place to make a pit stop because after all, almost everything on this island is gated or private property. There are very few public places, but as you can see, these islands where these ultra wealthy people live are extraordinarily clean. Not a single piece of litter. Everything is perfectly manicured. I mean, this is absolutely a paradise-like setting. No wonder these politicians think that the whole entire state is a wonderland when these are the types of places they live in. Certainly isn't that a place where the average person like me and you gets to live, but for those lucky enough to be able to afford it, well, this is in fact what everyday life looks like for these people. It's an absolute pristine setting. No litter, no garbage, nothing here will bring you misery or suffering. It's just absolutely perfect. Let's take a little pit stop here, where we run into Karens who don't understand how to use a self-checkout. So maybe not everything is perfect on Longboat Key, but pretty dang close. Apparently, walking in front of these types of establishments is not allowed if you're a mere peasant. You have to run gracefully. You have to leap like a deer for these rich people. In theory, there's actually two ways to get on and off the island. You can go north or you can go south, but it's really just one road. That's why I said there's only one way on and off the island. It's one road, but you can go south towards Sarasota or north towards Bradenton. But point being, it's that one single road, and it is very heavily patrolled. The speed limits are strict, perhaps less than what you would expect, and if you go speeding in here or your vehicle does look out of place, please believe they're going to detain you and investigate why you are standing out inappropriately on the island. In other words, you have to be in your utmost behavior, and you can kind of see that just from the way the workers go about themselves. But what I find interesting is every once in a while, I'll get a ride off the island, and it's obviously the people who clean the hotels, the people who cook in the hotels, just the workers in general. And many times, the people that work on the island, which at times could be as much as 30% of the island's population at a given moment, a lot of people, even those that frequent the island normally, fail to recognize that these employees are not getting paid a lot of money. People just assume that because they're working in brand new resorts along the beach or they're working in these gated communities that they're making a ridiculous amount of money, and that is simply not true. And many times when I Uber the workers off the island, the neighborhoods that they live in are some of the scariest neighborhoods in the entire metropolitan area, which begs the question, how safe really are these islands if, after all, the people that work on these islands happen to live in some of the worst neighborhoods possible? Of course, the people that are working on these islands are somewhat fortunate. They have a great environment, very positive, very upbeat, and they get to meet a lot of people. Unfortunately, what many people fall for is the notion that if they're working in these types of settings that they're going to strike it rich or meet the right person or anything along those lines, and thus they slave away, not realizing that they're systematically being exploited, because I do believe that people who work on these islands should be getting paid 30 or 40% more than somebody working on the mainland. Of course, that is not the reality. That's perhaps the way you would think it would work, but it's not actually how it works. And in fact, these people actually now have a very congested commute, particularly in the wintertime, which actually makes these jobs somewhat unattractive. And thus, many times, the people that actually work on these islands are getting more of an experience out of their working day in the fact that they're in a positive, upbeat environment. But at the end of the day, they're not going back to a mansion. They're going back to some scary neighborhoods. Many times, I've noticed that when I take these people off this island, they're really going to neighborhoods that even I'm afraid to go into. And these people actually have to live in these neighborhoods full time, besides the fact that then they're going around these rich people that have set up all these barriers for safety. But if you think about their security guards, their police officers, their dishwashers, their maintenance workers, Many times these people are not only living in poor neighborhoods that are very dangerous, but they're also many times not even documented workers. There's somewhat of a ghost phenomenon of a person who's here, but they're not really here. It's ridiculously odd to think that so many people on these islands, despite all these barriers, and here comes a truck with 10 workers or 20 workers, and I can't help to think how many of those workers are actually U.S. citizens. And of course, they're not going to do anything crazy because they're obviously trying to make a living. They're not doing anything harmful. But it is interesting to think, at the end of the day, how many of the people that work for these exclusive places are not even U.S. citizens. And of course, I grew up in Naples, which is tremendously more expensive than Longboat Key. So I always find it interesting when I'm driving somebody to one of these gated communities late at night and we're just having a good conversation, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I'm blah blah blah," or "I live here," or this or that, and you're just like, "Yeah, I grew up in Naples. I don't have this kind of money. I've never had this kind of money, but I've become bored by the idea of being around people like this." I remember I lived in Naples, Florida. Me and my wife would get checks, and she would be the one depositing the checks. And she would just be amazed at some of the people I worked for. We're talking like astronauts. We're talking like Tom Cruise's parents or something. And I was just like, well, just a regular person, regular house, another day at work. Wasn't special to me, but she would always be intrigued by like, oh, how were they? Where were they doing? I'm like, yeah, they were just an old guy that needed his couch hauled away or something. So you just get used to it after a while. And really, like I said, Naples, Florida, where I'm from, is just so much infinitely more wealthy than Longboat Key that really this type of money here, it's kind of baby money. Don't get me wrong, there's still huge amounts of people here that are important, but it's not like Naples. And honestly, if you're self-employed or starting a business, these aren't even the types of customers you want. You kind of will do better with middle class people. Like, there's people that have $1 million or $2 million house and they're a young realtor or something. Those types of people are good because it's new money they made. They're spending it. But when you get into these old money types of areas, man, these people, they really have a hard time letting go of their money. So working for them is not always the most productive way to spend your time unless there's fear in the environment. And then that totally changes. Rich people, when they are afraid, like let's say during a hurricane where resources are limited, then they fearmonger, then you can definitely take all types of money from them. But look at this construction site here, okay? It looks like the workers are not even allowed to drive their own vehicles to the construction site. They have to climb on a bus that takes them to another place. And I've always wondered, every time I pass these buses that bring the workers on and off the island, are those workers being paid hourly for the time that they are sitting in that bus? I think they should be getting paid, but are they really getting paid? Question mark. Are they? If anybody knows the answer to that, I would be intrigued to know if these workers that are being bussed on and off the island are being paid hourly for the commute time, because in theory they should be getting paid for it because they're not allowed to drive their vehicles to the construction site. And it's like the little details like that that I don't like about working in these types of places. Or when I pick up a worker and they absolutely do not know a single word of English, but they refuse to talk to me in Spanish because they're afraid of speaking Spanish. It's stuff like that that just gets on my nerves. I get passengers in the suburbs that reek like illegal herbal essences, and they're not afraid of anything. In fact, sometimes they're trying to use an Uber as a mule to transport stuff, blatantly, because you can smell it and you can see it in their presence. You just know they're up to no good. Yet, here are people that are working and they're afraid to speak with you and have a normal conversation because they don't speak English. And it's stuff like that, like I said, that just really grinds my gears about having to work on this island or places like this. Like, come on, dude, like, loosen up. It's obvious you're not born here. And then you got the ones that are going to tell you, oh, I was born here. And then you're like, okay, let's have a conversation in English. And they can't get very far. And it's very aggravating because it's like, it's almost like these people can't even have a conversation with somebody. Like, what type of life is that? You know, I was recently doing some, I watch a lot of YouTube myself on my spare time when I have the chance to do it. And I've been watching this series of people who leave the Dominican Republic and come to the United States illegally. It's called La Vuelta por Mexico, or the turn through Mexico, which means, the entrance to the border. And it's very clear that many of these people, like in the Dominican Republic, are able to get $30,000, $40,000 to come illegally to the United States. And I think, I live in the United States. You know how hard it would be for me to come up with $30,000 for anything? I probably couldn't do it other than on credit. And the reality is that many of these people that are smuggled into the United States, they're paying $10, $15, $20, $30,000 to be smuggled in the United States. That means that in their home country, somehow they were able to scrape up $30,000. And my question to you is, how many people in the United States can scrape up $30,000? I sure as crap couldn't do it right now. And well, the point I'm really trying to make is that for many of these people who come to the United States illegally to work, they were actually better off in their home country. They were close to their family, close to their culture. They could be whatever they want. They could listen to the music they want. They didn't have to worry about the social stigma, and they were somehow able to scrape up $30,000 or $40,000 to come over here, something that the average person in the United States simply cannot do themselves. It's starting to be a trend in the United States. I don't know if you guys know this, that people that come here illegally actually find out that they were better off in their home countries, and they leave the United States not because of racism, not because they're not legal, they leave because they were literally making more money back home. Imagine a guy that had his own business in the Dominican Republic. Maybe he was only making $300 or $400 a week. It's not a lot of money. But now you're in the back of a restaurant working for minimum wage, and the word that many of these people use in their vocabulary to describe their experience of living in the United States, the word is humiliating, a word that they are unfamiliar with in their home countries. In other words, a lot of people tell themselves, why am I coming here to be humiliated in the United States when back home in my country I was set? And it's a great question. A lot of people want to come to the United States, but when they get here, they find out that it really wasn't worth all they had to kill to get it. Like, take me, I'm Cuban. When I came to the United States, if you were Cuban, all you had to do was show up and they gave you your papers. You could become a U.S. citizen just because you were coming from Cuba. Now Cubans that come to the United States are illegal. Now, when there was a time period that Cubans could come over here legally, they didn't take advantage of that opportunity. And now that it's illegal and there's anti-Hispanic sentiment, they're coming over here to be illegal, to have absolutely no opportunity, to be humiliated. But all those years when they were able to come over here and get their papers, they didn't do it. They waited until it was illegal to then come over here to make things difficult. But they had the opportunity to come over here and make something out of themselves in the United States, and they didn't take that opportunity. Now, when the doors are closed, now they want to come over here because Cuba's starving. Well, why didn't you do it when you had the opportunity? I have so many family members in Cuba that for years we would tell them, come over here, come over here, come over here. And they never wanted to come over here because they were comfortable in Cuba. Now it's illegal to come over here. Cuba's completely in an unbearable situation with hunger and other problems that are going on over there. And now they want to come over here. But when they had the opportunity, they didn't. And that's kind of the thing about people that are coming over here to work right now, is that a lot of those people are finding out too late that the American dream was really a nightmare. Many of them are actually taking out loans from people they know or from people that are very dangerous to come to the United States to pay back the debt, not knowing that realistically it's almost impossible for them to pay back those debts. Chances are they won't be able to do it, especially if they get caught and get deported, and then it's all over. It's not worth it. But unfortunately, many people are just going on these voyages that are dangerous. It's not worth it to land here in the United States only to find out that even for the United States citizens, the situation right now isn't looking too good. All right, guys, so now we are in the perfectly circle island of St. Armands, which is wrapped around by Lido Key. So for all practical purposes, it's kind of Lido Key, but technically it's its own island because it has bridges. Well, anyways, here we are on this island, and on this island, there's a few houses on the outskirts that are beautiful. Some of those houses are said to be maybe some famous football players. Not really sure if there's any truth to that, but at the end of the day, very exclusive address. In the center, you have restaurants, ice cream shops, few stores, very beautiful place. The vibes here are usually great. Now, it is now about 5:30 in the afternoon, and this is usually when people are starting to leave the island. If you didn't notice it, we picked somebody up from a resort and we dropped them off somewhere in this vicinity, and that is the second trip that we did on the islands today. A less than $9 trip for an 8-mile ride. So far, they haven't tipped. Hopefully, they'll remember to do so. So you're starting to see that you're not even going to get tips from every single one of these people, despite the fact you're picking them up in very exclusive addresses. Now, there's always somebody in the comments section who takes the time out of their life to watch all my videos only to be a hater. And this person's saying that my job now is an Uber driver. This isn't a job. This is a side hustle. And I'm not even doing it for the money as per se. I'm doing it because of the experiences that I'm getting from it. This is just a new series on our YouTube channel, and it's going good so far. And I don't know if the long-term viewership is going to be great on these videos, but it's just another series of things we run through on our channel. Our channel has no direction. We went through the homeless, now we're going through the Uber, we've gone through the exploring the hoods, we've gone through the traveling. There's a very diverse amount of content on my channel. We don't just do one single thing on this channel. We kind of jump from series to series until the series is no longer relevant. And the reason I'm doing the Uber right now is because I feel that people need something extra. There's so many people that are going through hard times. I'm reading my comments and people just need a little extra. So I'm helping my audience find things that can help them. And we're going to explore this whole Uber driving thing. It's always been a curiosity to me, just like the homelessness has. And I want to jump off that page of homelessness and kind of move into another series. That's kind of how our channel works. We've been hopping from topic to topic, and I got people that used to watch my videos when we first started, when it was nothing but hood drive around. So we still have the same core audience, but we just do different topics and explore different ideas. And I think that's what keeps our channel relevant. I'm not just looking to make a YouTube channel that is about one topic forever, because you're eventually going to, it's not going to work forever. There's a YouTuber that I watch that I know makes a killing. Now, he had like an after prison series type of come up, and now he's running a business. I can tell you by the viewership this guy has on his YouTube channel, he's not doing it for the money, but he knows what he's doing. I want you guys to understand that not everybody in the comment section can be taken seriously. Working in Naples, Florida, where people own $1 million houses, $5 million houses, I've worked with people who own millions of dollars in real estate, and they have not a full-time job that drains all their life and energy, but they have a part-time job for their day-to-day livelihood. And this is what a lot of you guys that are in the comment section might not understand. It would be impossible to pay for my apartment, my livelihood, my food bill, my car bill, my lifestyle. It's impossible to pay for it Uber driving. That doesn't even check out. I live in Lakewood Ranch. I do the Uber thing on the side because I can make my YouTube channel, I can talk to people, I can expand my horizons by the people I talk to, and I'm creating a freaking YouTube series that's gonna make me royalties in the long term. The $50 or $60 or $100 that I make in a day here, that's lifestyle expenses money. That's not like supporting your life money. It would be impossible to support my lifestyle Uber driving unless you drove like 400 miles. I don't even know how it would work, but it's not possible, okay? So, and what you guys that watch these videos need to understand is those types of people, they have a poverty mindset. They can't wrap their head around the idea that I have a nice apartment, I have a nice truck, I live a good life, but on top of that, I'm also going to go out there and make $60 extra a day. Because to those people, they don't understand the value of $60. The reason that these rich people on these islands don't tip you is because they understand the value of a dollar. The reason they became millionaires is because they understood the value of a dollar. Poor people don't understand the value of a dollar. So to somebody stupid in the comment section, they don't understand why somebody who has a good lifestyle would then go and on top of that lifestyle make $100 on the side every day, because that $100 is extra. And extra, every single dollar counts. And that's why you're not getting these ridiculous tips from these rich people. These rich people are still counting dollars and pennies because their millions didn't add up overnight when they won a lottery ticket. This is money that over generation after generation was built up little by little, 1% at a time, sometimes even 0.5% of a time. But poor people don't think like that, because poor people trade their time for money, and you only have so much time in your lifetime. And if a poor person worked their entire life, it would never be enough to buy a single house on this island. You cannot work yourself into wealth because real estate, for example, appreciates faster than your income. So by the time you save it up, that real estate would be worth 3 times more than what you saved up. In other words, it's impossible for you to work yourself into this type of status of money. And I don't give a crap what these rich people tell you that they're self-made. They're not. They inherited this money from their daddy, and their daddy inherited it from their daddy. And if they didn't inherit the money, they inherited the position of money. Something that's a different topic of conversation that many people don't understand. Now, you can obtain position with education. You can give yourself titles. You can give yourself all these degrees. And maybe now you can get the position. You can position yourself into money, but it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it. All right, so we have another person on board, and this person is going from that same resort to downtown Sarasota to a restaurant on the waterfront. This is a less than $10 trip. They haven't tipped me yet. Now let's talk about something different. These are the weekend rich. These are the fake it till you make it people that are pretending like they're rich. People who got money, but they're not going to have it for too long. These are the types of people that give you ridiculously generous tips. These are the people that pretend they're rich for the weekend. In other words, these are people that live in somewhat normal middle class or, just presumptuous neighborhoods, but they're not really rich. They're renting, they're pretending the lifestyle. They might have a good job or something, but they're definitely not anything near the word wealthy. Now, there's something interesting about the United States, and that is if you really want something, you can almost certainly obtain it. You just have to decide how hard you want that thing and how much you're willing to sacrifice for it, but it is obtainable. So these are what I call the weekend rich people. These are people that they have somewhat decent jobs, but during the weekend, they want to go out and pretend like they're rich for the weekend. Monday morning, they go back to that office, and they have to go actually every night, they have to go back to that same apartment that really isn't all that fancy. But during the weekend, they're rich. They're going to tip. They're going to eat at the fanciest restaurants, and they're going to blow, a few $100s that are extra. During the weekend, they're pretending like they're rich. This is a very common thing here in Florida. And these are the types of people that are never going to get anywhere. These are the types of people that if they have money, they're not going to have it for too long, or they're indebted to their eyeballs. They're just living a fictitious lifestyle that they cannot afford to have. And good for me, the vast majority of these weekend rich people, is what I call them, are very generous. And they do give the best tips. And most of your best tips are going to be Friday and Saturday nights, where you can make $50 or $60 in tips as an Uber driver in one evening, accounting for at least a quarter of the night's income. What's interesting about that whole idea is that these are people that are doing it Friday and Saturday. Well, why are they doing it Friday and Saturday? Because Monday through Friday, they are enslaved behind a desk somewhere. So they're not really free. They're enslaved to a company. Now, rich people usually have careers. And there's a difference between a job and a career. Now, some people that watch my YouTube channel absolutely do not understand this concept. I have so many people who use the word job to describe my YouTube or job to describe this Uber thing that I'm doing right now. Neither one of these things are a job. A job means you have to be here at 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday. And you got to be there till 4 in the afternoon. That's a job. A career is something that you can do at your leisure. It's a long-term, lifelong thing. For example, this Uber thing is not a long-term thing. This is a short-term thing that I'm doing. So it can't be a career. My wife is a realtor. She may not make money as a realtor. She can't make any sales, but it's a career because it's a long-term commitment. My YouTube is not a job. It's a career. My wife, her real estate isn't a job. It's a career. That means a long haul, baby. We're talking stretched out over a lifetime. Now, the difference between jobs and careers is that a career may not make you money every single month, every single day. It will, however, support you over a lifetime. During those periods when your career is not moving 100%, you can take a job, you can take a side hustle, but that job or side hustle is insignificant in the long span of things. Like I've said, I have worked normal jobs. I mean, I'm at this company, and the person that works right next to me doing the same thing that I'm doing owns millions of dollars in real estate. And why are they working a regular job? Not because that job, they depend on it. That's just for their day-to-day living. You can't just lump sum every dollar you make into the same place, into the same thing. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that poor people make. They just lump sum their money into one thing. No, dude, you can literally have $1 million in investments over here and go Uber drive on the left. It doesn't matter. You could literally work a 9-to-5 job for a period of your life and have millions of dollars in real estate. You're not going to start eating away at your net worth because you want to eat a sandwich at a fine restaurant or something. No, you're going to make that money somewhere else on the side. And there may not be ways to make that huge net worth of money again. So just because you have a huge net worth, that doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden go out there and obtain more net worth. You can obtain daily subsistence. So just because somebody is sitting on a large net worth, I've sat on huge net worths, and you know what I had to do? Go work. Because if you don't go work, then that net worth isn't going to last too long. You wouldn't believe how quick $100,000 go. $1 million can go even. Alright guys, so now we're picking somebody up at the Ritz-Carlton, and we're dropping them off on Siesta Key. This will take us off of the islands briefly, as we're going to go through Sarasota, because Siesta Key is not connected to the other islands. It means if you're going to Siesta Key, you have to get back on the mainland. But this is Sarasota's bayfront, and you're literally on the water, and it's not quite like being on an island, but it kind of feels like an island. Notice the beautiful Royal Cuban palm trees, brick pavers. This is kind of what South Florida money looks like. Now with a $5 tip, this was about a $14 drive. Took 17 minutes. We drove less than 7 miles. Trying to wrap your head around the cost of owning $1 million house. So those houses that we were talking about on that island, the property taxes to live on Longboat Key are starting at around $12,000 a year, which is $1,000 a month, which is $250 a week, which is roughly what a person working a minimal job would make. So just the property taxes alone on a house that big equates to the income of a minimum wage earner. That doesn't include the landscaping. That doesn't include the HOA fees. Now, I'm not sure what the HOA fees are in that community, but I'm going to guess it could be somewhere between $700 to $1,800 a month, depending on what they're being charged. They also have to pay an upfront fee to join the golf club, and if you're in a fancy golf club, you also have to make charitable donations to be in good standing with your neighbors, because they do charity runs throughout the year, and if you're one of those people in the community that isn't charitable, you're not going to have too many friends on the golf course. Now again, I don't know exactly what the HOA fee would cost on an island like that, but I would guess somewhere in the range of $700 to $1,800, and that's just on the low end. That's one of those things, if you have to ask, you can't afford it, so if you were asking, probably out of your league. Anyways, there's costs associated with these properties as well, like homeowners insurance. You also have, pest control. You're going to have to do like annual trimming, which is not part of your landscaping fee. It's kind of like an extra, property cleaning details, pressure washing the property, air conditioning. I mean, when it goes on and on and on. And for example, cleaning a house that big isn't something that you're just going to do. It's a full-time job to clean a house that big by the square footage. What I'm really trying to say is that it's not just the upfront, okay, here's a $2 million house. I have $2 million. I can buy this house. The upkeep of these properties could easily run $70,000, $80,000 a year, which means that if you're the manager at a Walmart, you may not even be able to afford the upkeep on that property, even if you have the net worth to buy the house. A lot of these people that have a good net worth put a lot of emphasis on the value of their net worth, but what they fail to realize is that in an ever-increasing world of inflation, net worth means nothing if you don't have a new source of income. And thus, to really be well off, you don't just have a net worth, you have a net worth combined with a good source of income. I would say in today's world, at least $180,000 a year. And that is what a lot of these guys that are at the gym flexing about. How much is in your investment portfolio, young man? I have a lot of investments. And a lot of those guys are actually crying, saying that because of the new administration, I haven't been able to make any profits in 3 years. But what they're really failing to realize is that for a long time, so many people put so much effort into acquiring net worth that they forgot that if you have a net worth to maintain it, you have to have an income. And that is their own mistake, because they failed to realize that there's a balance between what you make and what you spend. And in an ever-increasing world of inflation, net worth alone does nothing for you. I can literally tell you that you are better off with a good source of income today than you are with a considerable net worth, because your general livelihood will be much better. It's designed to be that way, to make sure that people who have money still have to work. The notion that you're just going to sit back and relax if you have a lot of money is almost laughable, especially in today's world of inflation. A few years ago, it was all about the net worth. You guys remember during COVID, it was all about the net worth. Now those same people that used to brag about their net worth are actually stalled out economically because they don't have good influx of cash. And at their age, with their abilities and the type of economy we have today, those people are going to find a hard realization. Many of them think that they can just give their money to somebody else and have somebody else manage the money and make money for them. Little do they know that in today's world, that doesn't work either. In other words, you have a lot of people that are frustrated economically. They have a good net worth, but they haven't figured out what to do with it. It's actually a lot harder than you think to make money once you have money. Now, a lot of poor people think if they had money, they could make more money. I'll be the first to tell you, after many failed business adventures, that isn't how things work. That might be the way things work in your brain, but in reality, that's not exactly how things work. A vast majority of business endeavors today simply fail. Take the state of Florida, where the 99% makes less than people in Alabama. Most of Florida's income is just gathered around the 1% of top earners, but the vast majority of people in Florida simply don't have that much money. If right now I invested $100,000 into any business, landscaping, pressure washing, painting, transportation, anything really, chances are that somebody with a larger net worth could starve me out of business. They could have people that are willing to work for less than you, and they'll find them. Well, back to the career thing, right? It's not just for a year or two, it's for a lifetime. The problem when you have $100,000 and you invest it into a business is that investment becomes your job. But for somebody that has $10 million, it's a career. They can afford 2 or 3 bad years if year 4 and 5 are profitable. When I lived in Naples, Florida, I had very little overhead in my business. I kept my business investment at less than $10,000. That means that I was showing up in an old truck. It wasn't a piece of crap. It was a 2500, but it wasn't the newest one that was out there. Now, my competitors would go out there and they would buy a diesel, $50,000 diesel with a dump trailer, and they had a lot of overhead. I just kept pushing with my minimal investment because it was all I had. I could have gotten into debt and got more expensive equipment, but I realized something. Eventually, big corporations came around. We're talking like the 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We're talking like the college hunks, and those guys were paying their workers minimal wage. In fact, one of those companies that I mentioned made national news because they were actually paying their workers less than minimal wage. And those workers were doing exactly the same job that I was doing, namely going out to properties to pick up garbage. I was doing it as a business owner. They had somebody with a criminal record that just got out of jail and took the job minimum wage because they had no other option. Well, like I said, this company that was competing against me was so unethical that they weren't even paying their workers enough. Something to do with commute time. They weren't paying their workers for commute time. They were just paying their workers when they were actually on the ground working, which actually became somewhat of a legal issue for them. I don't know how it was resolved, but you may remember that in the news a while back. So basically, my point was that here came somebody with a multi-million-dollar investment that quite literally crippled my business to the ground. Luckily, though, I only had a $10,000 investment. Now, many of the guys that I was competing with were also starved out of business even quicker than me because their overhead was so much larger. Both my $10,000 investment and their $100,000 investment were both overshadowed by a big greedy corporation that invested tens of millions of dollars, used workers that were getting paid absolutely minimal salary, and were offering prices that were less than ours. For a while, their prices were so low that they were actually losing money. But they weren't really losing money. They were gaining clients, and they were starving other businesses that they were competing against. And that is the strategy that many of these big corporations use. They use the strategy of starving the competition out of jobs. In other words, if we lower our prices so much where we're losing money for 2 to 3 years, we're also going to starve our competition out of money. The difference is that their competition were smaller companies that they couldn't hold on for 2 to 3 years, but they were able to, for 2 to 3 years, offer their service so affordably that it starved out everybody they were competing with. And once they starved everybody else out, then they jacked up their prices even higher than before. And that is the strategy of many of these big corporations that have tens of millions of dollars, is they'll go into a segment of the economy and literally starve everybody out of business. So don't for a second think because you have $10,000, $100,000, or even $1 million to invest that your investment cannot easily be brought to ruin by somebody with 10, 100, or $1 billion. Do you understand? Even if you're a millionaire, you might think you're a big fish, but really you're a small fish, because if you're a millionaire and somebody with $100 million wants to put you in that situation, they can starve your business out, and they will. And that is a tactic that many of these rich corporations are using. And that's why a lot of these guys that have a few $1 million, they think they're big shot investors, they think they're all set. They don't realize that they're really an insignificant factor, and that their net worth doesn't have the ability to generate income the way they used to, because that position that used to belong to guys like me at the bottom is now shifting ever up the food chain to where only certain people are able to make that type of money. And it isn't people like me and you, and it's not even people that have millions of dollars anymore. It's just large corporations are starving everybody out of business. And there's different ways they can go about it. They can go about it the way that I mentioned, but there's other ways. One way that's becoming very popular is to systematically make the system so complicated, have to have so much overhead, that only the absolute wealthiest investors, people with the biggest pockets, can afford to be in business. And this is why you're seeing so many real estate laws come into play in the state of Florida. Now, many people are so stupid that they believe that these laws are coming into play to help people like them obtain housing. In what world do states like Florida make laws that benefit the little guy? No, these laws don't benefit the little guy. These laws benefit the big corporations. They're making it harder and harder. They're putting more and more overhead to where if you're at the bottom, let's say right now you're buying a house and you're buying a $300,000 house, they increase the overhead overall, but that overhead is the same for somebody buying a $10 million piece of property, because they have their own people to do the things you have to pay somebody else to do. Realtors, for example, property maintenance, etc., etc. All right, guys, so we are now on Siesta Key, taking our last passenger off the island. This was a $13 ride, but the person gave me a $5 tip. I honestly have no idea if this was a tourist local. We had a great conversation, but it didn't revolve around ourselves. It just revolved around other stuff. So I have no idea what this person was doing on the island. But regardless, we brought them off of the island and back into Sarasota, and that was the last ride of the day on the islands. So having money is much more complicated than you can think. And many people who have money are finding it ever more difficult to find direction with their investments, because whatever they were doing 3 to 4 years ago might have worked for a little bit, but now you're entering a new period and they're finding it difficult to turn their net worth into income. It's becoming ever difficult to do that for the average person even. And in that, a lot of people that are living in these ritzy areas are really actually struggling to hold on to what they have. A battle that the average poor person doesn't really understand, that just because you have something, that doesn't mean it's forever yours. You still have to fight just to hold on to it. Personally, I have found that throughout my life, the less money I have, the less productive I am, and the more money I have, then that is when I'm absolutely in grinding mode. I'm talking about the fact that with money comes responsibility, and the moment you obtain money is sometimes the moment where you tighten up the most, because you understand if you don't have the money, you're going to be in hardship. So now that you have the money, you have to be very responsible with it. Where people who don't have money sometimes aren't even that productive. And many times people today have focused so much on the net worth side of things that they're forgetting the productivity side of things, that net worth by itself isn't productive. And all these fancy houses that are out here, at the end of the day, somebody has to take care of them. And you would be a fool to think that the tax collector isn't going to absolutely tax the life out of every single one of these wealthy properties. So if you're from the hood, you just don't have that kind of money, you've never really understood it, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And in fact, the notion of just free-flowing money isn't a realistic thing. Many times when you go to the nightclubs and bars and restaurants, many of the people that you see throwing money in the air figuratively, and some people actually physically do that, are not really people that are actually set. The people that are actually set are counting pennies and dollars, not throwing $100 bills. And that is a reality that poor people perhaps may never understand, because obtaining wealth is a systematic practice. It's to have discipline over the long term that yields great earnings, but having lack of control keeps you in an endless cycle of poverty. And in fact, many people who come from poverty, when they do obtain lump sums of money, it doesn't last with them very long. There's an old saying, thousands years old, that a fool and his money will soon be parted. And boy, is that a true saying. Regardless, it's probably better to be 18 years old and homeless than 70 years old and in a mansion, because the most valuable asset that we have is our life. And if you're 70 years old and wealthy, you only have a few years to enjoy your life. But if you're 18 years old and poor, you got your whole life to look forward ahead of you. And things like finding a marriage mate for life, having children, and just raising a family are going to give you inherently more value than anything else. And one of the best tools that you're going to have to find a hood rat baby mama is a squatted truck on 24s. I'm sorry, I got carried away. If you are having trouble finding a hood rat baby mama, you need a squatted truck on 24s. You see this guy right here, perhaps he's not rich. Perhaps he lives in his mama's basement, but he's got a squatted truck. Guys, I don't know where this conversation is going at this point. I'm just going to have to leave. We were having an intellectual conversation, and here comes a squatted truck, and then my head became filled with poop. And that's what happens to a lot of us. We see a shiny truck, and we're like, oh man, I gotta have that truck right there. And there's just bad decisions. Kind of like my shiny big truck. But anyways, what do you work for? What do you live for? That's another question that's very important. So much talk about investment. What's in your investment portfolio, young man? You know what? Forget it. This guy right here, I don't care what his investment portfolio looks like. He has a squatted truck on big giant chrome wheels. Isn't that what life is about? I'll let you answer.